Wash, you and I have a paper on spatial voting in congressional elections. We also look at 2010, and you can see that there's a very big variation between people across districts and the spatial character of the voting. You know, to what degree proximity matters, and it seems like a natural consequence of this variation in the issue content of the coverage. Is it the case that you know, with higher quality, more issue content in the coverage, do you get people voting more based on proximity and less based on other factors?
So we don't know yet. I mean, we haven't looked at the effects on vote choice or things like. You mean sort of the way in which citizens are casting ballots and whether that's affecting issue voting. So we haven't looked at that. So I don't know. What we've only looked at. Well, so what we've looked at principally is sort of the knowledge and participation stuff. And so what we can say about that is that in the districts, you know, controlling for all kinds of other things, in the districts where there is more coverage and more substantive coverage, citizens are more likely to know things about the House candidates, and they're more likely to vote in the House election. When you get less coverage, there's more fall off. But so I don't know. We haven't looked at. We've done a little bit of stuff with issue voting in 2010. Trying to understand whether, like, sort of all the coverage of the Obamacare vote had a big effect on issue voting, and we couldn't really find any effects, but it hasn't been that widespread. So we could talk about that.
I was wondering, you have the data on people seeking out partisan news that's consistent with their predispositions. Is there any asymmetry to who seeks it out? So in other words, there's specifically, are Republicans, when their side has done poorly, more likely to seek out partisan news after something bad happens, or are they more likely to seek out partisan news after something good happens, or does that not matter at all?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question and a couple of different answers. So first, in my own work, I've looked at habitual patterns of information seeking, and there I don't see huge imbalances between the two parties in terms of what outlets they're seeking, although there is some variance, like conservatives are more likely to seek out talk radio that matches their beliefs, but that's because of availability, and the opposite is true for Democrats and liberals online. There's been other work, though, that suggests that when people seek out like-minded media does vary with the political context. So in the lead up to 2008, for instance, there are studies showing that Republicans were more likely to look at the other side, and the explanation is that they were information seeking. They wanted to know about this candidate that seemed to be emerging. So there is some evidence in line with what you're suggesting.
Thanks. This is for Danny and Jennifer. There's so much variation, as Hans's paper has shown. There's so much variation in, like, the media in the media markets as they fit to congressional districts. Have you tried? And it could be it was there, but it went by and I missed it. But have you tried interacting a lot of your effects with attributes of the market these congressional districts are in, whether it's, you know, number of newspapers that are in the district, or congruence between a newspaper market and the district, or things like this? Because I would suspect that a lot of your variables might depend on that in interesting ways.
So no, we haven't. I mean, so Hans gave us their data, and so we were controlling for the market convergence. Although that's not a perfect. I mean, so, you know, newspaper circulation areas are not the same thing as media markets, right? And so we're only capturing sort of part of that, and in an uneven way that's not great. And so I think we've not gone in and done any kind of like conditional effects to look at that. So in part because, you know, like, I think part because of the hesitance of trying to map the circulation areas unevenly to the media market control that we have. But so maybe we can talk about ways we might be able to do that.
Natalie, are you considering other issues for your experiment? For example, the latest climate change report that just came out seems like a natural thing to look at, and it seems just anecdotally that maybe there's more moderation in terms of pushing back on the overwhelming evidence, in my opinion, that we're in the middle of the effects of climate change.
I have not as of yet, but would love to look at other issues. I think there will be variability by issue and some moderation. And I also think that I'll find some instances similar to what Kevin found, that mainstream news media can polarize when those partisan cues are particularly crisp. So I think looking across more issues and replicating this is definitely the next step.
Or that events may have an impact also.
Mhm.
Thanks. For both Kevin and Talia about the experimental studies, to what degree do you think you are capturing some effect of news? I mean, I understand you guys study the media, and to what degree are you just capturing more arguments for and against these positions? Like, do you think that it's important that these are delivered via the news?
I'll bite at that one. Yeah, I do. So, I mean, let me, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but so the question would be, what if the same information were delivered in an entertainment show, like The Simpsons or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, actually, I think it's an interesting question, and to the extent to which, political stuff gets into entertainment shows, whether or not it influences attitudes, and the answer to that is probably. But the thing about the news is it's so that it creates a coherent product that is about that particular issue, and it's very very clear, and the way in which news is delivered and structured, I think is pretty much to have a maximal effect on people's. I mean, that's what we're here for when you tuning into one of those shows. So that would be my expectation, is that other formats would have more diffuse, episodic kind of effects.
Building on that, I think that it may be a more moderate effect from entertainment programming, but I know that Diana Metz and Lee Lochner have published some work looking at Law and Order and how people's attitudes on crime changed after that, and found some supportive evidence. I've also done some work looking at exposure to comedic information. So if we present things in a more comedy form instead of hard news. And I was really plucky and optimistic that was going to reverse these trends of selective exposure. And in fact, everything was worse. So people were more likely to pick comedic information that matched their beliefs, and were less tolerant toward other political views when they looked at comedic information in comparison to hard news information. Pardon?
I think we're done.